Okay, at long last, after promising you this for so long, we are underway. These photos are in no particular order. Well, they are for me, but they're not for you. They're not grouped. And there's about 40 slides in the full set. So let's get underway with the very first one, which is that of William Patrick O'Connor Jr. I've come to the belief now that his grandfather was not William Patrick, but in fact just William. But family legend, it's a bummer at times. Here's another one of Brother Paul Virgil, same person. I don't hide the fact that he's my most favourite uncle of all. Sadly, he died when I was 15, 16. And it's a damn shame that I never had to share my teenage years with him. Really sad. There's Brother Paul after his graduation from Sydney University back in the 40s. He would be on his way now to Victoria to teach. There's Brother Paul in his habit. Let's see what happened there. There's Brother Paul in his habit, I would suspect in the streets of Sydney somewhere, with my mother, his sister, and my father. There we have another photograph of the O'Connor family. Brother Paul would have been in monastery at that stage of the game. He was put in monastery when he was 13. The guy on the left is Edward Michael, and his sister Elizabeth Josephine, and my mother Marie Kathleen. There's Uncle Eddie, as we called him, with one of the kids. He had a bit of a tribe. I think he had 5 kids all up. We'll get to those shortly. And there's Eddie looking rather spiff. Looks like he's on his way out somewhere, all dolled up. Here we see Eddie in a singlet and his wife Molly Marnie. What a great German name, Marnie. Molly Marnie. Can you imagine it? Ha! One of the kids, probably the eldest, Patricia, but I'm not sure. So don't quote me on that. This is Eddie as a baby. Check the chin. The old chinny chin chin. The old O'Connor chin. Yeah, even as a baby. Now, this is the O'Connor family, Eddie and Molly. The girl at the back, the elder looking one, that's Patricia. Paul Michael, beside him, was a very, very fond cousin of mine, probably my favourite cousin. We became very close buddies through the Rosary towards the end of his life. He died very early. He collapsed on a forklift. He had a aortic rupture. The larger girl in the front, that is Maureen. The one next to her on the right is Colleen, and I can't for the life of remember who the other child is. They were a big family. They were a loving family. They were a great family, actually. We used to spend some time together, and it was always great fun. Now here we are with a family group photo with Brother Paul there in the front, which is pretty obvious. To his left is his mother, Lily Sheehy. She was not born O'Connor. And then his father there, William Patrick. Looks like he's been in the wars. It looks like he's got a band-aid over his eye. The lady just to the left of Brother Paul is my mother. And then the lady sitting down is the sister of both Brother Paul and Mum. And that was Lily and Josephine. And beside her was her husband, Roy Dyer. Here we go. We have, I don't know who the person on the left is. Lily and Josephine is in the middle. And Molly Marnie, or as she was to become, Molly O'Connor. Well, the beauty of modern technology. The doorbell rang, went and attended to it, and I was given 3 beautiful, hot apple turnovers straight out of the oven by a neighbour. Right, the photo on screen is my grandmother, Lillian O'Connor. You know, they looked so old, didn't they, in those days? They really did. And beside her is a daughter. We call her only Lil. Simple, simple, simple. There's Lil again with a dog. Got no idea what the dog's name was. Now this one I do know a bit about. That's Mum. I believe she was about 8 or 9 there, probably living in Kingsford or Randwick here in the Sydney eastern suburbs. She looks like a little waif, does she not? Okay, this is obviously a little bit later in life. On the left of the picture there's Mum, there's Nan, and then you've got Pop William Patrick. Then you've got Uncle Frank, he's a he, and you've got Eddie sort of standing up there, and the last fellow on the right sitting down is grandmother's brother, Alan Sheehy. This is a classic photo. This is when brother was Mr. When his mother passed in 1953, he applied to Rome to be exempt from his vows. Whilst he was a good and faithful brother, it was never a vocation as you would normally expect a person to be called. He was put in to the monastery at 13 years. He was a brilliant man. He was a French teacher, chemistry teacher, physics teacher, and he was a fantastic bloke. Died at 43. Another one there. No idea who they are. The one with the red dot there, that's me mum. Again, as a little girl. The backyard. This is a photo from the 1980s. It was a series of studio portraits we had done. Fortunately, we thought, well, we better get them done. Just in case, you know. So we had a professional sitting and we had some wonderful photos taken. And that is my mother, Mary Kathleen O'Connor. And that's my father, Harold George Facer. Dad died in 1987 at 69. Mother passed away in 1990 at 69. Another one of me mum. My goodness, it's the fattest she ever was, I think. Here we go. This was a party or a wedding or something. There's no doubt about that. And me mum's on the left, Eddie's in the middle, and Auntie Lil's on the right. Eddie was a pastry cook. He was a master pastry cook. He'd also been in the Air Force in the Second War. Eddie died of emphysema fairly early in his life. I think it was in his late 50s. The flour that he used to cook with caused him to have that mongrel disease, emphysema. A classic old photo from the 40s, or probably even earlier. It looks like it could have, no, it would be. It would have been in the 30s, late 30s. Mum, I think Mum there would have been about 15 or 16, and her sister Lil would have been a couple of years, maybe 3 years older than her. There's my mum with probably me. Not 100% sure of that. That looks like it was in a residence that my dad built in Narwee, in an interesting suburb in Sydney. It was sort of heading west, but was also heading north, so we'll call it a northwestern suburb of Sydney. Another wonderful photo I'm so glad I had, and that is Mum. She really is only very young there, and her mother. Before Dad died, he decided he'd go through the family photos and he would write who the people were on the actual photo. and it annoyed me mum very much. But I can say now that I am so grateful that they did that. Certainly I know who they are, but there are other photos that I wouldn't have had a clue. Wouldn't have had the foggiest idea who they were. Now, Mum on the left, Pam. Pam was Lily and Josephine's daughter, eldest daughter. She became a mort. She went to England on a working holiday and married a pommy bloke, came back here to live, and they've been here ever since. No idea who the lady on the right is. Again, Mum, no idea who the other lady is. Probably Gwen. This is the classic wedding photo of the 40s. Mum was married in December 1940, and that was her wedding gown and a veil. Wow. They knew how to do it in style in those days, didn't they? That's an interesting photo. One my brother found. The original is the one on the far left. A little bit of work, well, not a little bit of work, but a lot of work had been done to restore that photo. And then on the right, I did a little bit of work on getting rid of some of the facial blemishes and the neck, and that was all done on Photoshop back in the day. Another one of me mother, no idea where. Now, there's Nan with one of the kids. Who knows? Would not have a clue. See, this is the point I make. Photos with nothing written on them. I know it's Nan, but I've got no idea who the child is. There's Nan again, and from Dad's records, that's me. Little me. Golly. No, I'm not too sure where that is. I think that's in St. Peter's. At that time we were living in Crown Street, St. Peter's. Here, after Brother had left the Brotherhood, he moved to a place called Euroa, and he was teaching in Euroa. And he was found dead in his room. You can see this photo was taken not at the time when the river was in high flood. But yeah, no, he was that was his usual place of residence down there in Euroa. But he did most of his brotherly teaching at St. Ornard's, which we'll talk about in just a moment. This, of course, is the grave of William O'Connor and his wife Annie Ahern. It's at Botany Cemetery. I'm trying to make a trip out there, and we'll see how we go. It's a fair way for me to get on public transport. Well, it's not a fair way, it's a long way. Here's the mob. Back row. Left, Lily, 2 unknown males. The next row was Grandma, and then Pop, my mum, next to her father, and the rest of them are she-he's. Who are my grandmother's brothers and sisters? No idea. No idea who the child is either. This is a unit or flat. It was a flat, a real old-fashioned flat in Bondi Junction, which is an eastern suburb of Sydney. This photo was after it had been massively renovated. It has now been pulled down. But Pop lived in Waverley Street, and he was found there some week after he had actually passed away. And I remember in 1953, I was, 8, walking up those stairs on Easter Sunday in 1953, and Pop came out and said, Nana's died. And that was sad. And Nana hadn't been to church for a very, very long time, and on that Easter morning in 1953, she decided that she wanted to go to Mass, so she got up, got dressed, went down to the church in Waverley, and died in the church. So there you go, the divine providence of it all. This is a little bit about St. Ornard's. This is where Brother taught. it's of no real interest to anybody, I wouldn't have thought. I think the next photo, hopefully, is where he taught. It was a boarding school, and I very well remember one Christmas in the early 50s. We went down there to stay with him, and we had, because all the boys weren't there, we had a chance to reside at the residence there for the time we were down there. You can see the two guys there, myself and my brother, so it gives you an idea of how young we were. It was an interesting thing about, there was no air conditioning in those days, of course, so what they would do, they had a hose running across the top of the windows, and then on the outside of the building they had this hessian curtain. The hose had holes in it, and the water would drip from the hose, wetting the hessian curtain, and the breeze would come through and act as an air conditioner. It was very, very effective, actually. It was very, very clever. This is where William O'Connor lived, and his wife Annie Ahern in Kingsford. This is where the old fellow died. He died in the house. I think I might have mentioned it before, that the old fellow had cancer, and Mum often related the fact that the smell was very bad, and they were always burning sugar to hide the smell of the cancer. There's another photo of Brother Paul as a lad. He is a very, very young person there. I would say that if he's 18, I'm Donald Trump. So, and then that's about the end of the slideshow that we have so far. That's the one I've been promising for so long. I hope you enjoyed it. It was sort of nothing spectacular, but it was interesting to see these people in a movie setting, if you will.